Okay, in other words, it wasn't accepting the U.S. neoliberal package. So therefore, we invented some humanitarian concerns and bombed them. So now they'll accept it. Yeah, that's the way the world works. And it'll work that way as long as we allow it to.
Let's go for the gentleman in the blue shirt there.
Thanks. It's a shame to have you here and not hear you talk about the last events in Lebanon. Could you just elaborate on where do you see it going, the ramifications for the region? I know, but it's one of the only hopeful...
No, I live there. I have a vested interest. Yeah.
Reform from within.
Okay, Lebanon. I'll go as quickly as I can. I guess I take a personal interest because I knew Rafik Hariri pretty well. In fact, when I was beaten up on the border of Afghanistan, he was the second person to call me. This is the former Prime Minister who was murdered last year, to say, I will send my personal jet. President Pervez Musharraf is a friend of mine, and since we don't take gifts from Prime Ministers, I said, no, thank you, but good of you to call. I saw him on fire after the bomb killed him. I was 400 meters away because I'd hurt my back. I was taking some exercise on the Corniche, and it blew up. He blew up in his convoy right in front of me. And everybody who's been murdered since in Lebanon, I know personally. I believe that Baath Party security was involved in his murder, using, of course, Lebanese officials who were loyal to Syria. I don't think President Bashar al-Assad said, you know, who will rid me of this meddlesome prime minister? No. Although there appear to have been threats from the presidency, which Walid Jumblat constantly recounts, like the threat to him, which was, tell Walid I have my Druze too, etc. I have to say that actually after I got so quickly to the scene of the bombing, I actually saw the first policeman arrive and start taking the bits of metal out of the crater and putting them in their pockets. They were removing the evidence from the scene of the crime. I also have to say, I then named the 3 top Lebanese I believe were probably involved in the killing, Lebanese senior officers in the security services, which the Lebanese press heroically then reported, Fisk says the following did the crime. And that was a good wake-up call in the morning. I then learned that General Tufayli, who was the head of the Écouteur at the Amn al-Am, the head of the listening section of the General Security, had put a tap on my home phone number. So I wrote a story about him and said, since you often get phone numbers wrong, it's 370615 Beirut. So yes, I am a little bit, taken by the Lebanon story. I think that the fact that the civil war did not restart after Hariri's murder was a great sign of Lebanon's maturity. I believed, when I saw those bodies, I saw people burning in their cars to death. They were being cremated in front of me. I thought that the ghosts of every mass grave were climbing out of the tombs. And it didn't happen, because the Lebanese do not and will not tolerate another civil war, though they've still got to learn why the civil war happened. You know, when Al Jazeera, the only television station in the Middle East, brave enough to say, we're going to do a whole series of archive films on how the Lebanese civil war happened, the Corniche in front of my house, packed with hundreds of thousands of people every night, suddenly was empty. Everyone had gone home to watch television to see why they were killing each other. Not a bad example of Al Jazeera's effect on the Middle East. But I think it's in a very dangerous situation because these negotiations that are going on, which began with, Aoun having tea with Nasrallah and Jumblat having tea with Jajar and so on and so forth. I think they're not turning out. I had dinner with Jumblat only 5 days ago. It feels like 5 weeks, in which he was deeply critical of Nasrallah's performance, especially of the issue of Sheba Farms. I think Lebanon remains in a very tense situation, and I think if there were more assassinations, especially, and I will not name them, if there are certain people I can think about, there is a danger of there being a form of sectarian fighting starting. There is a huge army in Lebanon now, big enough, I would have thought, to probably liberate Baghdad, but nonetheless, because, of course, it is formed of all the different sectarian groups, largely Shiite, of course, because it is the largest community, that army could not move in against a real civil outbreak of civil fighting, because, of course, the soldiers would feel that their allegiances were to their own people rather than to the nation. They might not. They're pretty good, the Lebanese army, actually, despite all the things that are heaped upon them, but it would be a great danger. So I watch the situation like you do, and I listen to the words of Sister Syria, like we all do. Someone said to me the other day, is it free in Beirut now? And I said, well, actually, beforehand, before the Syrians left, when we were talking over lunch, we would go like this. And now we just go like this. It's an improvement. It's a definite improvement. The gentleman here in the black.
How do you think the U.S. should get out of Iraq?
Well, now and today is the time zone. Look, they've got to talk to their opponents in the insurgency. Not al-Qaeda. The Iraqis will have to deal with al-Qaeda. That's something else. But I met 3 of the leaders of the insurgency. You call it what you like, terrorists, resistors, rebels, whatever, in a neighboring country. Not Syria, but Jordan, actually. And 2 of them spoke beautiful English because they were all 3 were former officers in the Iraqi army who had trained 8 years, living and dying, fighting another superpower called Iran. An invasion we supported, so we were very keen on them fighting in that. They got all the training they needed. One of them, the first guy walked in, he was an ex-general, or still regards himself as a general. He was the man who commanded Fallujah in the second American attack in November. And he walked in and said, Mr. Robert, we meet again. And I said, we haven't met before. He said, oh, yes, we have. He said, you were on the Iraqi front line under fire at the beginning of the Iran-Iraq war, and I was the man who brought the first tank unit across the Karun River into Iran, and you climbed on my tank and interviewed me. And back in Beirut, I went back through my files, and there he was, you see, even had his real name. These guys are trained in Britain and America. They can talk, okay, in English. You don't even need a translator. They will talk if they're talked to. We will say, okay, we never talk to terrorists, we don't talk to terrorists, we don't talk to terrorists. That's what we said about the North Vietnamese. That's what we said about the North Koreans. That's what we said about AOKA in Cyprus. It's what we said about Irgun in Palestine. It's what we said about Mau Mau in Kenya. It's what we said about the IRA in Belfast. They all end up having tea with the Queen and visiting 10 Downing Street. That's how we do it, and that's how you'll do it, the other way around. You'll get out and you'll negotiate. Even now we've got a situation where, for example, in places like Mosul, and this is a fact, you've got junior US officers who have an understanding via third parties that if you don't fire mortars at us tonight, we won't do a foot patrol in that street tomorrow morning. So you've already got a kind of matrix of contacts, and everyone knows who everyone else is. It's like the whole thing about, Hamas, Israel won't talk to Hamas. Well, Israel's always been talking to Hamas. Just shortly after the Oslo Agreement, a senior officer in the Israeli army went to talk to one of the major Hamas leaders outside Jerusalem. It was on the front page of the Jerusalem Post. When I was interviewing Hamas members who'd been thrown into Lebanon by 1993, I remember I was interviewing them for my paper, and I said, well, I'm off to Israel tomorrow, see what the effect was. And the effect was that one of them ran up to his tent, came back with a notebook and said, do you need Shimon Peres's home number? And it was Shimon Peres's home number. So they talk. And believe me, the Americans are talking now to people through, and I'm talking, the insurgents, the actual Iraqi insurgents, are the soldiers of the Iraqi army who fought the Iranians between 1980 and 1988, which was mainly our idea. I'm going to run out of steam quite soon, and it's good to see Doug nodding his head. Wait a minute, I'll have to take 2 more, just 2. Gentleman there in the yellow. No, that one over there in the yellow. And then you afterwards. Gentleman in the yellow with his hand up there. Orange, sorry.
I can see. Thank you very much, Dr. Fisk. It's been an absolute pleasure to listen to read to your writing and to come to this lecture. We all know that America is going to leave Iraq. There's very little doubt of that. What about Iran?
Okay, first of all, yes, the Americans will leave, the Americans must leave, and of course the Americans can't leave, which is the equation which turns sand into blood. Iran. I think Iran is part of the wallpaper that we are being fed to keep our eyes off other countries like Pakistan. Pakistan, which has a nuclear scientist and a friend of Pervez Musharraf, that was going around the Arab world offering nuclear facilities, but we don't care about. No war crimes trials, no process, no tribunal for him, or indeed for Mr. Musharraf, who's personally a very likeable chap, but much of the northwest frontier provinces are effectively run by Islamists of the Bin Laden Wahhabi persuasion. I mean, they got elected, didn't they? We love elections in the Middle East. We just get so annoyed when the pesky Palestinians elect Hamas and the Egyptians go for the Muslim Brotherhood, and then, you know, then the Lebanese elect members of Hezbollah. It's a big problem. You love democracy, and then they vote for the wrong people. And that's one of the problems in the local government elections on the Northwest Frontier province and Balochistan in Pakistan. And that's where the real danger lies. They got a bomb and they have it, which means they're safe, of course, from us. Just as North Korea. We're not going to invade North Korea because they've got a bomb. Iran has not actually done anything illegal yet. But if I was an Iranian, I'd try to get a bomb quickly to stop the Americans turning up. However, just one thing, remember, when the first American tanks arrived in Baghdad in April of 2003, we didn't know whether they were going to turn right to Tehran or left to Damascus. They ain't going anywhere now except for home. The Iraqi insurgency has saved Syria and Iran from any possibility of a ground invasion. Bombing, that's something else. One more, the gentleman over there, and then I'm going to
Thank you.
work out which country I'm in.
My respect to both of you for your courage, doctors, and also for your conscientiousness. My question to Dr. Fisk is, how do you feel about being a foreign journalist being invited to Turkey to speak while other journalists in Turkey are being persecuted?
I have spoken in Turkey before, and I have talked about the Armenian genocide at some length during a lecture in Istanbul, which was actually supported by Sabancı University, the private university in Istanbul. And after I finished speaking, one of the members of the audience, who said he was a retired general in the Turkish army, said I was absolutely correct in what I said about the Armenian genocide. I think the page is turning in Turkey. I think it's a great honor to be invited to speak in Turkey, and I look forward to it very much.